At dawn on August 10th, 1792, the royal family awoke in the Tuileries Palace to a sound that no crown could silence, warning bells echoing across Paris. They rang from church towers, neighborhood watchposts, and revolutionary strongholds. To the citizens outside, they signaled action. To those inside the palace, they signaled the end. By early morning, armed crowds of National Guardsmen, fédérés from the provinces, and radicalized citizens surged toward the Tuileries. Many had once sworn loyalty to the crown. Now they carried muskets, pikes, and the conviction that monarchy itself had become an enemy of the people. For Marie Antoinette, this was not merely a riot. It was the final unraveling of her identity. Just 3 years earlier, she had stood as Queen of France, draped in silk, surrounded by ceremony, the embodiment of dynastic power. Now she stood behind barricaded doors, listening to the approaching noise of revolution, aware that history was closing in. This was not chaos, it was reckoning. The Tuileries Palace had already ceased to be a true residence of power. After the royal family's failed escape attempt to Varennes in June 1791, the palace became something else entirely, a gilded cage. Soldiers watched every corridor. Revolutionary officials monitored every movement. The monarchy still existed in name, but trust was gone. Varennes shattered the illusion that the king and queen were allies of the revolution. From that moment, public hostility intensified, and it focused especially on Marie Antoinette. Pamphlets flooded Paris. Caricatures circulated openly. She was labeled Madame Deficit, accused of bankrupting France, betraying the nation, and conspiring with Austria. Her birth as an Austrian archduchess made her the perfect symbol of foreign corruption. In the public imagination, she was no longer a woman, she was a threat. As insurgents surged toward the palace on the morning of August 10th, the Swiss Guards, professional mercenaries sworn to protect the king, took their positions. They were disciplined, they were armed, and they were ready. But Louis XVI hesitated. Despite warnings, despite the rising violence outside, the king refused to authorize decisive force. Instead, he made a choice that would doom his defenders and seal the monarchy's fate. He ordered his family to flee. Escorted through the palace gardens, Louis XVI, Marie Antoinette, and their children sought protection from the Legislative Assembly. The Swiss Guards were left behind, leaderless. Within hours, the palace was overrun. Hundreds were killed in brutal fighting, including dozens of Swiss Guards who were massacred after surrendering. Their bodies were mutilated. Their loyalty was rewarded with death. By nightfall, the monarchy was suspended. France had crossed a line it could not retreat from. That same day, the royal family was taken under armed escort to the Temple, a medieval fortress repurposed as a revolutionary prison. This was not protective custody, it was erasure. Marie Antoinette was stripped of her title. Official documents no longer referred to her as queen. She became Madame Capet, even while the king still lived, a deliberate act meant to deny her royal identity. Language became a weapon. She would never again sleep in a palace. Months passed under increasing restrictions. Visits were limited, surveillance intensified, even moments of motherhood were regulated. Then, on the night of August 2nd, 1793, officials from the Paris Commune arrived at the temple. Marie Antoinette was informed she was being transferred. No explanation, no farewell. Before dawn, she was escorted through empty streets to the conciergerie. the prison known among Parisians as the antechamber of the guillotine. From that moment forward, she was completely alone. Her separation from her children was final. According to later memoirs by her daughter, Marie Antoinette embraced her without speaking, fully aware that walls had ears and silence was the last privacy she possessed. The prison registry logged her arrival, not as queen, not as royal prisoner, but as Madame Capet. Her cell measured roughly 3 by 2 meters, stone walls, iron bars, a single narrow window overlooking the Seine. Contemporary accounts describe the women's cells as damp, cold, and infested. Initially, she was given no bed, only straw. This was not neglect, it was design. On August 5, 1793, an official decree ordered that Marie Antoinette be placed under continuous surveillance. 2 armed gendarmes remained inside her cell at all times. They did not turn away, not when she changed clothes, not when she attempted to wash. Officer John Baptiste Michonis later admitted under oath, she had no privacy whatsoever. Even bodily dignity was denied. A prison physician documented severe weight loss, exhaustion, and internal bleeding. His access was limited. Treatment was minimal. By late September, witnesses reported that her hair had turned white. The transformation was complete. In a final act of quiet resistance, Marie Antoinette attempted to smuggle a letter to her sister-in-law, Madame Elizabeth. It was intercepted. The note survives in the French archives. In it she wrote, "I have nothing left to hope for in this world." The revolution had not only imprisoned her body, it had crushed her future. Marie Antoinette's trial before the Revolutionary Tribunal began on the morning of October 14, 1793, inside the main hall of the Conciergerie. Calling it a trial is generous. By this stage of the revolution, the tribunal functioned less as a court of law and more as a mechanism of political cleansing. Acquittals were rare. Outcomes were expected. Justice was secondary to symbolism. The Republic did not need evidence. It needed closure. Official transcripts later published in the Bulletin du Tribunal Révolutionnaire show that the charges brought against Marie Antoinette extended far beyond treason. She was accused of conspiring with foreign powers, financing counter-revolutionary plots, sabotaging France from within, and finally, an accusation so extreme that even hardened revolutionaries hesitated to voice it publicly. The charge was incest with her own son. The allegation involving the Dauphin, Louis Charles, was based on statements extracted from the child while he was imprisoned, isolated, and subjected to relentless ideological pressure. Even among radical Jacobins, the charge was understood for what it was, a political weapon. Revolutionary leaders knew that treason alone no longer satisfied the public appetite. Marie Antoinette had to be morally destroyed, not merely condemned as an enemy of the state. By attacking her as a mother, they aimed to erase the last human sympathy she commanded. The trial was overseen by Antoine Quentin Fouquier-Tinville, the tribunal's public prosecutor and one of the most feared men in revolutionary France. His reputation was built on efficiency. Trials under his authority moved quickly. Sentences followed immediately. The courtroom was packed with carefully selected spectators loyal to the revolutionary cause. Armed guards lined the walls. Observers later noted that the atmosphere resembled a theater more than a court. Marie Antoinette was permitted legal counsel, but only in name. Her lawyers were given little time to prepare. Witnesses were not allowed to testify in her favor. Evidence consisted largely of hearsay, seized correspondence, and interpretations of private letters written years earlier under entirely different circumstances. Many of these documents came from the so-called Armoire de Fer, a hidden iron safe discovered in the Tuileries Palace after the monarchy fell. Its contents were presented as proof of secret dealings, though historians have since noted that most documents were either ambiguous or unrelated to her direct actions. Facts mattered less than narrative. Marie Antoinette entered the courtroom dressed in black, wearing a simple white bonnet. Gone were the jewels, the gowns, the theatrical presence of a queen. Witnesses described her as visibly weakened, her face pale, her body thin, yet her posture remained firm. The journalist Prudhomme, no supporter of the monarchy, nevertheless recorded that she carried herself with restraint and composure. When questioned about correspondence with Austria, she denied involvement in military conspiracies. When pressed on financial accusations, she rejected the inflated claims attributed to her name. Then came the incest charge. For the first time during the proceedings, Marie Antoinette broke her silence. Her response, recorded in the official minutes, was brief. "I appeal to all mothers." The courtroom fell silent. Even among her enemies, the accusation had crossed a line. The moment passed quickly. Fouquier-Tinville moved on. The damage, however, was done. The proceedings lasted 2 days. That alone reveals their nature. No extended deliberation, no genuine weighing of evidence, no meaningful defense. At 4 a.m. on October 16, 1793, the jury returned a unanimous verdict: death. Marie Antoinette showed no visible reaction. According to court officials, she listened calmly as the sentence was read. She asked no questions. She requested no mercy. She was returned to her cell. She had only hours left. Before dawn, Marie Antoinette was permitted to write one final letter, addressed to her sister-in-law, Madame Elizabeth. The letter survives. It is not political. It is not defensive. It is maternal. She asked forgiveness from those she had wronged, whether knowingly or not. She expressed concern for her children. She forgave her enemies. She wrote, "I forgive all my enemies. I die in the hope that my death will unite my children." There is no bitterness in the words, only resignation. At approximately 7 a.m., guards entered her cell. Prison records and later accounts confirm she was allowed to change into a plain white chemise. Her hands were bound behind her back, standard procedure for those condemned by the tribunal. Unlike her husband, who had been executed months earlier in a closed carriage, Marie Antoinette was denied that final concession. She was placed in an open wooden cart. The symbolism was unmistakable. She was no longer treated as a former queen, but as a common criminal. The cart left the conciergerie under heavy escort. The route to the Place de Révolution was deliberately slow. Revolutionary authorities wanted Paris to see her. Police reports describe mounted guards flanking the cart, with crowds lining the streets along Rue Saint-Honoré. Accounts vary on the crowd's reaction. Some cheered, others watched in silence. One revolutionary observer, Jacques Roux, later noted that she remained quiet throughout the journey, her head held upright, her gaze fixed ahead. This composure unsettled many who had expected fear or collapse. By the time the cart reached the square, Marie Antoinette had endured more than an hour of public exposure. Her hair had been cut short earlier that morning, as required before execution. Witnesses remarked on the contrast between her fragile appearance and her controlled demeanor. At the scaffold, the executioner Antoine Quentin Fouquier-Tinville assisted her. In his later deposition, Sanson recorded a brief moment, one that would become her final recorded words. She accidentally stepped on his foot. She apologized. "Pardon me, sir, I did not do it on purpose." Moments later, it was over. Official records state that the crowd shouted "Vive la République," yet several observers, including the journalist Mercier, remarked on a brief, uneasy silence. Her body was placed in a common coffin and buried in an unmarked grave at the Cimetière de la Madeleine alongside hundreds of others executed during the Terror. No marker, no ceremony. It would take more than 20 decades before her remains were recovered and reinterred at Saint-Denis following the Bourbon Restoration. The execution of Marie Antoinette marked more than the end of a life. It marked the destruction of an entire order. Her trial revealed how revolutions, once unleashed, can turn symbolism into justification and vengeance into law. She was not executed solely for what she had done. She was executed for what she represented. When the execution ended on October 16, 1793, the machinery of the revolution did not pause. The crowd dispersed. The square was cleared. The guillotine was prepared for the next name. Marie Antoinette's death was processed with bureaucratic efficiency. There were no official memorials, no sanctioned mourning, and no acknowledgment beyond the brief notation entered into the tribunal's records. She had ceased to exist as a political figure. That, in the logic of the Terror, was the point. Her burial in an unmarked grave at the Cimetière de la Madeleine symbolized the Revolution's intent to erase not only monarchy, but memory itself. Kings, queens, nobles, and commoners executed during this period were interred together, stripped of identity even in death. Yet memory proved harder to eliminate than crowns. In the years that followed, Marie Antoinette became something the Revolution never intended, a contested symbol. To some, she remained the embodiment of aristocratic excess and foreign influence. To others, especially outside France, she transformed into a tragic figure, destroyed by forces beyond her control. Historians have debated her role ever since. Modern scholarship suggests that while Marie Antoinette was politically naive and often tone-deaf to the suffering around her, she was neither the architect of France's financial collapse nor the mastermind of counter-revolutionary conspiracies attributed to her. Many accusations levied during her trial were exaggerated, fabricated, or politically convenient. Her execution did not resolve France's crisis. It merely silenced a symbol. Perhaps the most enduring tragedy of Marie Antoinette's story lies not in her death, but in what followed for her children. Her son, Louis Charles, remained imprisoned under brutal conditions. He died at the age of 10, neglected and isolated, his body buried without ceremony. Her daughter, Marie Therese, survived imprisonment and was eventually exchanged in a prisoner swap. She carried the psychological scars of her childhood captivity for the rest of her life. The Revolution spared no one completely. Marie Antoinette's execution reveals a recurring paradox in revolutionary movements throughout history. Revolutions begin by rejecting injustice. They often end by institutionalizing it. The Revolutionary Tribunal was created to defend liberty. In practice, it became a mechanism of fear. The guillotine, introduced as a humane alternative to older methods of execution, evolved into a symbol of impersonal mass death. Justice became efficiency. Dissent became treason. Suspicion became evidence. Marie Antoinette was not executed because the legal process demanded it. She was executed because the revolution required a final, undeniable break with the past. In 1815, following the fall of Napoleon and the Bourbon Restoration, Marie Antoinette's remains were exhumed. The unmarked grave was identified through careful records and physical remains. She was reburied at the Basilica of Saint Denis, alongside generations of French royalty. The act was symbolic. Not a return to absolute monarchy, history had moved on, but a recognition that even revolutions must eventually confront the humanity of those they destroy. So what really happened to Marie Antoinette? She was not simply executed. She was stripped of identity, isolated deliberately, tried in a court designed for conviction,
and destroyed as a symbol rather than judged as a person. Her story is not one of innocence or guilt alone. It is a case study in how power reshapes morality during moments of upheaval. The French Revolution reshaped the modern world. It introduced ideas of citizenship, equality before the law, and popular sovereignty that continue to influence societies today. But it also demonstrated how easily those ideals can be suspended when fear takes control. Marie Antoinette's final months reveal what happens when justice becomes theater and punishment becomes messaging. History rarely remembers victories. It rarely lingers on the human cost paid to achieve them. The fall of Marie Antoinette was not merely the fall of a queen. It was the moment a revolution proved that it could be as unforgiving as the system it replaced. Her story forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. When does justice become vengeance? When does liberation justify cruelty? And who decides when fear outweighs law? If you want more documented history that textbooks soften or avoid, subscribe to Hidden Secret Tales, where forgotten stories are finally heard.